The transport ship moved through the void, a slow, ungainly vessel carrying a cargo of humiliation. Inside the cramped life pods, stacked like eggs in a carton, the Cathari crew sat in stunned silence. They were cold, hungry, and stripped of all dignity. Their grand conquest had ended not in battle, but in a silent, disabling blink. They had been processed, not fought. Commander Volak's pod was separate, wired for monitoring. He watched through a small viewport as the starfield shifted. He recognized the faint, distant glow of a nebula that marked the border of Dominion space. The journey had taken weeks, measured in the slow decay of the pod's minimal power cell. A mechanical arm from the human transport detached his pod and gave it a gentle push towards a pre-recorded navigational beacon. The human ship then turned, its engines glowing dully, and limped back towards the inner darkness from whence it came. Vorlak's pod drifted for another day before a Cathari border patrol, alerted by the beacon, cautiously retrieved it. The scene on the patrol ship was one of disbelief. The mighty Commander Vorlak, hero of the Cygnus campaign, was extracted from a primitive human life pod, gaunt and hollow-eyed. The data crystal he clutched in his hand was the only object he carried. He was taken immediately to the regional oversector. The oversector, a formidable elder named Grax, viewed the crystal first in private. The recording was stark. A human female, Juhei Park, in a plain room, delivering her message with a chilling lack of emotion. Then came the sensor logs, automatically recorded by the talon of supremacy up to the moment of its death. Grax watched the human fighters being swatted away. He watched his fleet advance with perfect arrogance. He saw the moment every system died. He saw the dark, human tugs approach and the systematic scuttling of his empire's pride. There were no lies in the data. The truth was undeniable and devastating. Vorlak was summoned to give his verbal report. He stood before the council, his uniform hanging loose. He told them of the quiet world that did not scream or beg, but watched. He told them of the trap that felt like no trap, of the weapon that did not look like a weapon. They did not defeat our strength, Vorlak concluded, his voice a broken whisper. They made it irrelevant. They prepared for our arrogance, and we delivered it to them in perfect measure. They do not wish to fight us. They wish for us to leave them alone, and they have built a wall to ensure it, not of stone, but of a story. The story of the fleet that vanished. Back on Earth, life had resumed a new kind of normal. The debris field around the moon was officially designated the Guardian Graveyard. It was a navigational hazard and a stark monument. Telescopes on Earth could see it. Children learned about it in school. It was a fact of life, like a mountain range in the sky. The United Earth Defense Directorate was no longer a secretive project. It was a public institution, its funding and authority solidified in a way no peacetime organization had ever managed. The vault remained its heart, but now there were open training facilities, public recruitment drives. The mood was not one of militarism, but of sober vigilance. The galaxy was not a friendly place in a quiet observation dome on the lunar far side. Director G.A. Park met with Una Choi. Below them, visible through the thick glass, was the construction site for Jallarhorn II. It was not a replica. The principles were the same, but the design was evolved. The Cathari had provided a perfect live test. Now, humanity improved the system. The Oversector's message arrived, G.A. said, her eyes on the construction drones. Formal apology for the misunderstanding. An offer of peaceful diplomatic relations. They propose an exchange of ambassadors. Una gave a soft snort. They are afraid. They think if they are nice, we will not turn their next fleet into scrap. That is exactly what we want them to think, G.A. replied. Fear is a better deterrent than war. Our ambassador will be polite and firm. The message will be the same. Look up at our moon. Remember the story. They stood in silence for a while, watching their new shield being built. On a beach in Jiaj, Tayan Lei watched the sunset with his family. His daughter pointed at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. "Daddy, is one of those the bad ship?" He looked up. Somewhere up there was a dark, twisted shape that was once the cruiser that shot him down. "No, sweetie," he said, ruffling her hair. "The bad ships are all gone. Those are just stars." It was a necessary lie for a child. The truth was that the bad ships were still there, a ring of silent warnings. But the sentiment was true. The immediate danger was gone. His wife squeezed his hand, and he knew she understood. He had told her everything, in the quiet of their bedroom. The fear, the ejection, the drifting, the incredible. Silent victory. In a barracks at the new UED orbital station. Junseo Yoon and Sumin Kang were running a training simulation for new boarding teams. The scenario was not against Cathari. It was against a generic, technologically superior enemy. The tactics were the same. Speed, shock, overwhelming control. Remember, Junseo's voice echoed in the recruits' helmets. Your goal is not to kill. Your goal is to make their technology meaningless. You are the hand that turns out the lights. After the sim, he and Sumin shared a coffee in the mess hall. "Do you think they'll come back?" Sumin asked, staring into her cup. Junseo shook his head. "Not them. Maybe others. Different species, different ships. The story will spread, but some will need to hear it for themselves." He smiled, a tight, hard smile. "We will be ready. With a better story." Years later, the tale of the Imperial Armada was a legend in the galactic fringe. It was told in trading posts and on scout ships. Details were warped. Some said humanity had a super weapon that ate starships. Others whispered that Earth was protected by ancient ghosts. The truth, a carefully engineered resonance cascade, was less exciting, and the humans never confirmed it. The mystery was part of the shield. Humanity had taken its place in the cosmos, not as conquerors or eager explorers, but as the quiet neighbors with a very loud fence. They traded cautiously, communicated sparingly, and watched the skies ceaselessly. The lesson of the Cathari was etched into their soul. The only war you win is the one you prevent. In the vault, now expanded and humming with next-generation technology, the watch continued. Screens showed the peaceful solar system, the steady progress of construction at Lagrange points, the quiet drift of the Guardian graveyard. The nightmare scenario had happened, and they had been ready. The galaxy had learned a new word for caution: Earth and humanity. Content behind their wall of silence and shattered warships hoped it would be a lesson that lasted. The silence that followed the fall of the Cathari Armada was louder than any battle. Across Earth, billions of people watched their screens, struggling to understand. The terrifying lights had gone out. The ships were still there, but they were dark. Confusion reigned, then a slow, hesitant relief. There were no cheers yet, only a collective holding of breath. In the vault, there was no time for relief. G.I. Park's voice was calm and steady as she issued commands over the secure network. All recovery teams proceed with Phase 2. Priority is the evacuation of non-combatant Cathari personnel. Follow the sterilization protocol for all strategic systems. We have a narrow window to finish this cleanly. The cleanup was a massive, organized operation. It was not done with anger, but with a cold, terrifying efficiency. The bulky human tugs and salvage vessels attached themselves to the dead warships like parasites. Inside the alien hulls, the work was methodical. Squads led by people like Junseo Yoon and Sumin Kang moved from deck to deck. They used handheld translators to give simple, direct orders to the stunned Cathari crew. Move to the main hangar. Bring nothing. You will be evacuated. The Cathari, from lowly technicians to proud junior officers, obeyed. The shock was too deep. Their technology, their might, had been rendered inert by a force they did not understand. The sight of humans in solid, unglamorous armor, moving with purpose through their sacred halls, broke their spirit more completely than any fight could have. On the bridge of the Talon of Supremacy, Commander Vorlak was forced to watch. Junseo Yoon stood beside him, a silent guard. On a small portable screen, Vorlak saw feeds from across his fleet. He saw his magnificent vessels being boarded. He saw his crew, his warriors, being herded like cattle into human transport shuttles. He saw drones placing small, ugly packages on the warp cores of his destroyers. He knew what those were. "You are barbarians," Vorlak hissed, his translated voice flat with despair. "You destroy what you cannot understand." Junseo glanced at him. "No," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "We understand it perfectly. It is a weapon that came to our home to kill our people. We do not keep weapons pointed at our own heads. We break them." One by one, on the screen, muted flashes of light erupted from within the hearts of the Cathari ships. There was no sound in the vacuum, but each flash marked the final death of a vessel. The human charges did not cause giant explosions. They simply melted the core and critical systems into a useless lump of slag. The ships were now just empty, radioactive shells. The evacuation was swift. The Cathari life pods, small and orange, were launched from their motherships in clusters. Human tugs, equipped with wide-neck grapplers, collected them. They were stacked together, a harvest of orange seeds, and moved towards a large, waiting transport ship that had been brought from the asteroid belt. This ship was old and slow, a converted freighter. Its only job was to carry its silent cargo to the edge of Cathari space and release it. After 3 days, the work was done. The space near Earth was littered with the dark, dead hulls of the Imperial Armada. They would serve as a lasting debris field, a warning to any who approached with ill intent. The human salvage teams had pulled back. The only activity now was the slow departure of the single transport, carrying thousands of confused and humiliated Cathari in their life pods, and one separate, smaller craft carrying the high command, including VOR Lac in his bear, white cell aboard that command shuttle. Vorlak was given one final audience. A screen flickered on. It showed Director G.A. Park sitting in a simple room in the vault. She looked tired, but her gaze was unwavering. "Commander Vorlak," she began, "your journey home will be long. You will have time to think. You came here believing in a story. The story of a powerful empire and a primitive world. That story was wrong." She leaned forward slightly. "We have watched the stars for generations, not with wonder, but with fear. We prepared not for friends, but for the exact arrogance you displayed. We built one weapon designed for one scenario, an overwhelming show of force from a technically superior enemy. You performed your role perfectly." Vorlak felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. They had not just defeated him. They had used him. "You will be returned to your people," G.A. continued. "You will carry a new story. Tell them that Earth is not a prize. It is a trap. Tell them that humanity does not wish for war, but we have spent every day of our recent history preparing to win the first one. The only one. Do not test us again. The next herald will not be met with mercy. They will not be met with anything at all." The screen went black. Vorlak was left alone with the crushing weight of truth. He was not a defeated warrior. He was a messenger, a carrier of a plague of caution. His empire would learn of a species that did not fight with claws and plasma, but with patience, secrecy, and a single devastating trick. Back on Earth, the world slowly learned the truth. The global networks, once filled with panic, now broadcast explanations. The UEDD revealed the existence of Project Jallarn, a defensive system decades in the making, built in secret by a fractured world that only united in its paranoia. There were no images of great battles, only before and after shots of the Cathari fleet, first glowing with power, then dark and dead. People emerged from shelters. They looked up at the night sky. If they had a powerful telescope, they might see the new, dark shapes in orbit near the moon, not stars, but tombstones dot in a quiet dining hall in the vault. A few of the key players shared a meal. Taeyeon Lee, his body bruised but his spirit light, ate with a hearty appetite. Junseo Yoon and Sumin Kang sat together, speaking in low tones about the boarding operations. Yoona Choi picked at her food, her mind clearly still on the resonance wave calculations. G.A. Park joined them, setting her tray down. For a moment, they ate in silence. Too tired for celebration. They will tell stories about this, Junseo said finally, stirring his soup. All over the galaxy, they will talk about the day the Imperial Armada disappeared at Earth. Yoona looked up, a faint, dry smile on her lips. Good. Let the story be the shield. The less they know about how it really works, the better. She tapped the table with her finger. The reality stays here. With us? Taeyeon nodded. The story is that we obliterated them with ease. He gave a slight shrug. It's not wrong. They finished their meal, these architects of a new galactic reality. Outside, the world was celebrating its survival. But here, in the heart of the mountain, they were already thinking of the next threat, the next secret, the next necessary layer of defense. Humanity had not won a war. They had ended one before it could truly begin. And they had sent a message, not with a shout, but with a whisper of absolute, terrifying power. The order was given without fanfare. In the vault, Yoona Choi's finger pressed the button. It was not a dramatic slam, but a firm, decisive click. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The screens continued to show the Cathari fleet, their weapons glowing brighter as they prepared to unleash hell on Earth. Then, the universe changed. It did not begin with a flash or an explosion. It began with a silence. A sudden, profound quiet that seemed to swallow the electronic hum of the Cathari ships. On Earth, astronomers and ham radio operators were the first to notice. Every artificial signal from the alien fleet vanished from the spectrum. It was as if a switch had been thrown in space. The effect was visual. From hidden locations across the Earth-Moon system, hundreds of Project Jallarhorn's pods had launched moments before. They were not missiles. They were canisters that burst open, releasing a fine, glittering dust that spread rapidly, forming a faint, shimmering cloud between the Cathari fleet and the planet. To the aliens, it looked like a last-ditch, pointless attempt at a smokescreen. But then the hammer platforms activated. There was no beam of light, no projectile. They emitted a specific, cascading resonance wave, a carefully crafted set of vibrations that matched the harmonic frequency of the Cathari, ship's warp cores, and primary power systems. It was like finding the exact note that makes a wine glass shatter. On the bridge of the Talon of Supremacy, Commander Volok was giving the final command to fire. The word died on his lips. Every light on the massive console flickered and went dark. The steady, powerful thrum of the engines, a sound so constant it was felt more than heard, stuttered, and ceased. The main viewing screen fizzed into static. The only light now was the emergency glow of a few red panels, powered by separate, simple batteries. "Report!" Vorlok roared, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. "What is happening? A power failure?" His crew scrambled at dead controls. "All primary systems are offline. The core is dead. It's not responding to restart sequences," cried the engineering officer, his voice rising in panic. "Shields are down. Weapons are inert. We are on emergency life support only. Across the entire Armada, the same scene played out. The mighty cruisers, the destroyers, the formidable dreadnoughts, all became dark, silent tombs of metal, drifting helplessly. Their elegant formations broke apart as ships drifted on their last momentum, bumping gently into one another with hollow, thunderous clangs that echoed through their hulls. The glow from their engines and weapons faded, leaving them as nothing more than angular shadows against the stars. On Earth, the visual feeds showed the terrifying alien lights simply going out. The menacing green glows of their weapons powered down. The shimmering energy of their shields winked away. The Armada was still there, a dark cloud blocking the stars, but it was now just a cloud of scrap metal dot in the vault. The mood was one of intense, silent focus. Una monitored the wave front's propagation. Total systemic collapse confirmed across 98% of the fleet, she said, her voice clinical. The remaining 2% are smaller support vessels with simpler power systems. They are attempting to maneuver on secondary thrusters. She looked at Chie. Phase 1 is complete. The Armada is neutralized. Chie nodded, her face tight. The relief was there, buried deep, but it was overshadowed by the next step. This was not over. Initiate Phase 2. Cleanup protocol. Send in the tugs. In the silent aftermath, Tayan Lei drifted in his life pod. He had seen the alien lights vanish. He had felt nothing. No shockwave, no sound. One moment the Cathari were gods of war ready to smite his world. The next they were just dark shapes. His pod's short-range scanner, a simple device, showed no energy readings from the nearest cruiser. It was dead. A signal crackled in his helmet. It was a human signal, strong and clear. All ghost pilots, this is vault control. Recovery is en route. Hold position. The enemy fleet has been disabled. I repeat, disabled. Good work, ghosts. Disabled. The word did not seem big enough. Tayan let out a breath he felt he'd been holding for hours. He looked at the monstrous shape of a cruiser, now dark and harmless, and a slow, fierce smile spread across his face. Meanwhile, from Earth and from hidden docks on the moon, new ships emerged. These were not graceful fighters or mighty battleships. They were bulky, utilitarian craft, space tugs, salvage vessels, and armored boarding pods. They moved with purpose, swarming towards the lifeless Cathari fleet like worker ants approaching a fallen predator. Leading one of the first boarding teams was Commander Junseo Yoon. His ship, the UEDD Brawler, was a rugged, unlovely thing built for durability, not speed. It docked with the talon of supremacy, using mechanical clamps, its drills cutting through the inert outer hatch. There was no resistance. The doors were just dead metal. Junseo and his team, including Captain Sumin Kong, entered the dreadnought. Their helmet lights cut through the oppressive darkness. The air was stale, the gravity weak as the ship's artificial gravity was failing. They moved down corridors meant for tall, gray warriors, their boots echoing in the silence. They found Cathari crew members stumbling in the dark, their pit-like eyes wide with confusion and terror. The aliens were helpless, their superior weapons useless without power. Junseo's team moved quickly, securing the bridge. They found Commander Vorlak there, trying in vain to activate a secondary console. He turned as the humans entered, their armored forms illuminated by their own lights. He drew a sidearm, a kinetic pistol that still held a charge. Junseo didn't flinch. He simply raised his own rifle, a solid, reliable weapon. "Your ship is dead," Junseo said. His voice translated through a speaker on his suit. "Your fleet is dead. Lower your weapon. This is your only warning." Volek stared, his arrogance shattered, replaced by a dawning, horrifying understanding. They had never been the hunters. They had been the prey, walking blindly into a trap. The pistol clattered from his fingers to the deck. Suman Kong stepped forward and secured his hands with polymer ties. "The message is simple," Gensio said, standing before the captured commander. "Your offensive capability is gone. We are taking your officers. The rest of your crew will be evacuated to life pods. We will collect the pods and deposit them on the nearest habitable world on your border. You will be left with your lives and with a story." Back on the Brawler, Gensio watched on a monitor as the systematic work began. Drones attached small, precise fusion charges to the warp cores of each major Cathari ship. There would be no salvaging this technology, no risk of it being restarted. One by one, with muted flashes contained within their hulls, the great warships of the Imperial Armada were permanently scuttled, their carcasses destined to drift forever as a monument to their failure. In the vault, Ga and Yuna watched the operation proceed with flawless efficiency. The Cathari had come for a war of annihilation. Humanity had responded with a clinical surgical operation. There had been no glorious battle, just a switch being flipped and an empire being dismantled. The void between Earth and the Moon, once empty and silent, became a stage of fire and light. Taeyin Li led his squadron of Falcon fighters in a tight formation. To the Cathari sensors, they were a pathetic but bold gesture. Their engines burned hot, their weapons systems powered up, painting bright, obvious targets against the dark. On the bridge of the Cathari flagship, Commander Volok watched the tactical display with a bored expression. "They send insects to sting a starship," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Destroy them. Make it visible. Let their world watch their courage turn to ash." The forward Cathari cruisers unleashed their weapons. Not the heavy, city-breaking beams held in reserve, but precise lances of emerald plasma. They cut through space with terrifying speed. In Taeyon's cockpit, alarms screamed. "Break and evade. Pattern Delta," he yelled, throwing his fighter into a violent spin. The plasma bolts were faster than anything he had ever faced. To his left, a flash of silent light marked where Ghost 2 had been. The pilot, a young man named Jisoo, was gone before his emergency beacon could activate. Taeyon gritted his teeth, grief and rage a cold ball in his chest. This was the plan, he told himself. This was the awful, necessary cost of the playbook. He fired a volley of his missiles. They streaked towards the nearest cruiser, detonating harmlessly against a shimmering energy shield 100 meters from the hull. The explosions were bright and impressive for the cameras, but they did not even scorch the alien metal. "Shields are impenetrable to our weapons," he reported, his voice clipped and professional for the recording devices. "Repeat, conventional arms have no effect." He dodged another plasma bolt, the heat of it washing over his canopy. "Ghost 3 is hit. I'm ejecting." Another voice cried out, followed by a beacon signal blinking onto the network. One by one, the brave sparks winked out. The global broadcasts, pieced together from telescope feeds and surviving cockpit cameras, showed a massacre. In homes and shelters across Earth, people wept and held each other. It was a demonstration of utter hopelessness. In the vault, the mood was grim but focused. G.I. Park watched the loss of life on her screen, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. Each lost pilot was a personal failure, a weight on her soul. Yuna Choi monitored a different set of data. "Enemy vessels are holding formation," she murmured. "They are advancing at a steady pace. Their sensor focus is entirely on the remaining fighters and our surface missile silos. They are not looking for passive systems. They are not scanning the Lagrange points. Arrogance is a blinding filter. Taeyon's fighter was the last. He weaved through a storm of plasma fire, his maneuvers desperate and brilliant. He closed to what would be, for a human enemy, point-blank range, and emptied his railgun slugs. They sparked against the shield. A cruiser turned its main weapon towards him, a slow, deliberate move meant to intimidate. The message was clear. You are not a threat. You are a target for practice. Ghost Leader, this is Control, a calm voice said in his ear. It was Director Park herself. Your mission is complete. Your bravery is noted. Eject now. Taeyun didn't argue. He pulled the black and yellow striped handle between his legs. Explosive bolts blew the canopy away, and his seat was rocketed into the cold vacuum. He watched, tumbling slowly, as his beloved fighter was vaporized by a single, contemptuous shot from the cruiser. His suit's thrusters fired automatically, stabilizing his spin and pushing him on a slow, safe trajectory away from the battle zone. Life pods, tiny and bright, dotted the space around him, his surviving squadron mates. They had played their part as the sacrifice. The Cathari fleet, now convinced of Earth's military impotence, began its main advance. The massive dreadnoughts, including Vorlak's Talon of Supremacy, moved forward from the rear. They passed the shattered debris of the human fighters without a second glance. Their goal was now geosynchronous orbit, the perfect position to dominate the planet. On Earth, panic began to truly set in. The defiant first punch had been thrown, and it had done nothing. World leaders, their faces pale on the secure feeds, demanded to know what the secret project could possibly do now. Some argued for immediate, unconditional surrender to save lives. GA turned to face the main camera for the council. If we surrender now, we become slaves. We have one chance. They are exactly where we need them to be. We must see this through. Her voice allowed no argument. She cut the political feed. It was now a military operation in space. The Cathari ships arranged themselves in a classic orbital bombardment pattern. Their ventral weapons, massive barrels that glowed with a hellish inner light, began to power up. The target selection was clear. Major capital cities, military hubs, industrial centers. It was a textbook subjugation maneuver, designed to break a planet's spirit with a few precise, horrific strikes. Vorlak addressed his crew. Target the primary population centers. We will begin with the one called New York. Let their greatest icons be the first to fall. Their fear will do the rest of our work for us. Down in the vault, Yuna's screens were a tapestry of light. One display showed the enemy fleet, now fully within the zone marked by a faint green circle on her plot, the optimal engagement range for Project Jallarhorn. Another display showed the status of hundreds of hidden platforms. They were not ships. They were simple, ugly blocks of machinery and focusing arrays, hidden in the dust of the moon's far side, camouflaged as asteroids, or sitting silently in high orbit, disguised as old communication satellites. They had no offensive weapons. They had no engines. They were a single, distributed instrument. All platforms are sensed, Yuna reported, her voice dry. Resonance cascade is ready. The trigger sequence is armed. GA stood beside her, looking at the image of the Cathari dreadnought powering its main gun, aimed squarely at the eastern seaboard of North America. Billions of people below, unaware of the vault or Jallarhorn, could only wait for the fire from the sky. She thought of Min-Soo Kim, still at his station in the orbital watchpost, a sitting duck if the bombardment began. She thought of Taeyun Lee, drifting helplessly in the combat zone. She thought of all the lives in the crosshairs. "Director," Yuna said softly, "they are about to fire. We must act." G.I. Park took a final breath, the weight of the world literally on her shoulders. She looked at the cold, gray face of Commander Vorlak on the main screen, a face full of cruel certainty. "No more demonstrations," she said, her words final. Activate Jallarn. Scorch the sky clean. Yuna Choi did not smile. She simply pressed the physical red button under the clear shield on her console. There was no grand sound in the vault, only a soft, deep hum that vibrated in the bones, and on her screen, a single word flashed: deployed. The first warning was not a dramatic blaring of sirens, but a soft, persistent chime in the quiet of the orbital monitoring station. Min Soo Kim's eyes flicked from his personal tablet, where he had been reading a novel, to the main hull screen. A string of amber symbols cascaded down the side. Anomaly at the heliopause. His fingers, accustomed to the routine of quiet shifts, danced across the tactile interface. He expanded the data, calling up the long-range gravitic sensors and the FTL disturbance arrays. The numbers were wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. He leaned forward, the novel forgotten. System, verify source. Exclude internal error and natural phenomena. His voice was calm, a low murmur in the dimly lit room. The station's artificial intelligence, a simple but efficient program, began a diagnostic. The amber symbols pulsed. Then more appeared. Multiple contacts. Not one anomaly, but dozens. Then hundreds. The numbers kept climbing. Min Soo felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This was no comet swarm or sensor ghost. The formation was too perfect, too coordinated. It was a fleet dot. He opened a direct line to the main command center. The face of Director G.A. Park appeared on a secondary screen. She was in her office, a cup of tea steaming gently beside her. Min Soo? Report. Director, we have multiple confirmed contacts breaching the heliopause. Formation is tactical. Velocity is sublight, but consistent with a carrier wave from a recent massive warp event. He sent the data packet. It's an armada, ma'am. Heading straight for the inner system. Ji-hee's expression did not change, but her eyes hardened, the softness of a moment before vanishing. She set her cup down without a sound. Scale? Over 300 capital signatures. Countless smaller escorts. They outmatch anything in the historical database by several orders of magnitude. He took a breath. They will reach Mars orbit in 18 hours. Initiate Guardian stand. Full global alert. I am on my way. The screen went dark. Min Soo's fingers were already moving, executing the protocols he had practiced 100 times, but never truly believed he would use. Across the globe, in bunkers and command centers, lights turned from white to red. Silent alerts flashed on the screens of presidents, generals, and admirals. The world, fractured by 100 petty arguments, was suddenly united by a single, cold fact. They were not alone. And the visitors were not friendly dot in the heart of a mountain in South Korea. The real nerve center of Earth's defense hummed to life. This was not the public-facing UEDD headquarters in Geneva. This was the vault, a place that did not exist on any official map. Director G.A. Park entered the main chamber, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. The room was a vast hemisphere of screens and holographic displays. At the central console, a woman with sharp eyes and her hair tied back in a severe bun watched the incoming data stream. This was Yuna Choi. They are not even trying to hide, Yuna said, her voice flat. Their energy signatures are blatant. They are broadcasting power, like a warrior beating his chest. G.A. stood beside her, watching the red icons bloom on the tactical plot like a spreading stain. Arrogance. They think we are blind or primitive, or both. Status of the project? Jallarn is nominal. All platforms report green. The lunar and asteroid clusters are silent and undetected. Their scan patterns are broad, looking for big power sources, big weapons. They are missing the needles in the haystack. A faint, grim smile touched Yuna's lips. just as we hoped. The political leaders of Earth, connected via secure link, were a chorus of panic and bluster. Some demanded immediate communication. Others called for a show of force with the conventional space fleet. G.I. listened, her face a mask of patience. Finally, she spoke. We will follow the protocol. We will attempt dialogue. We will show them exactly what they expect to see. A broadcast was sent, a message of peaceful greeting and inquiry. The response was not long in coming. As the alien fleet, a breathtaking spectacle of dark metal and shimmering shields, settled into a menacing cloud just beyond the moon, a signal was beamed to every screen on Earth. The creature that appeared was humanoid, but with gray, leathery skin and eyes like black pits. It wore ornate armor. Its voice, translated by its own systems, was a cold rasp that filled the airwaves. People of Earth, we are the advance guard of the Cathari Dominion. Your world is now a protectorate of the Empire. You will disarm your military networks. You will submit your governance to our overseers. You will provide detailed inventories of all biological and mineral resources. You have one of your planetary rotations to signal compliance. The image shifted to show the terrifying scale of the fleet. If you refuse, we will scorch your cities from orbit until your will is broken. This is not a negotiation. It is a declaration. The age of human sovereignty is over. The message ended. Global silence followed, and a rising tide of terror and anger. On the bridge of the Cathari flagship, the Talon of Supremacy, Commander Volok watched the panic on intercepted human news channels with satisfaction. His second-in-command, a younger officer, studied their sensor feeds. Their orbital defenses are negligible. A few primitive satellites, some armed stations with chemical propellant weapons. Their planet-side militaries are mobilizing, but their technology is centuries behind ours. This will be a swift annexation. Vorlik nodded. They are insects. They buzz loudly, but they will be crushed underfoot. Order the vanguard to advance. Let us show them the futility of resistance. Destroy their orbital assets. Crush any ship that dares to lift off. Let the fire in their sky be their answer. At a launch facility in Kazakhstan, Commander Tayan Lai fastened the last buckle on his flight suit. His squadron, the Ghosts, were boarding their fighters. These were not the secret projects of the Vault. These were old Falcons, space-adapted jets that were fast and agile, but armed with missiles and railguns that would be little more than fireworks against Cathari shields. He knew the mission profile. It was not to win. It was to be seen. He climbed into his cockpit, the familiar scent of oil and ozone filling his nostrils. The control systems lit up. Ghost leader to all points, he said, his voice steady. Remember the playbook. We are the defiant, brave, and utterly outclassed first line of defense. Make it look good. Eject protocol is mandatory when I give the signal. No heroes today. Understood? A series of affirmatives chimed in his ear. On his tactical screen, he saw the monstrous shapes of the Cathari vanguard, a dozen cruisers moving past the moon. Their weapons glowed with a malevolent green light. The order from the vault came through. Ghost Squadron, you are cleared for engagement. Godspeed. Tayan took a deep breath. Ghosts, launch. Let's go give them a show. Across Earth, billions watched as tiny, brave human fighters rose like sparks from the planet, heading towards the wall of alien metal. In the vault, Ga and Yuna watched the same display. The red icons of the enemy fleet crept closer. The green dots of the Ghosts sped to meet them. It has begun, Ga whispered. Yuna's hand hovered over a separate shielded console. On it, a single, simple interface glowed with a soft blue light. It was labeled, in plain text, Jalahern armed. Let them come a little closer, she said, her eyes fixed on the plot. Right into the killing box.